All right, I think we are recording. So we're gonna go ahead and start in on this. And like I said, if the recording is decent, I will put it out on Facebook and maybe even YouTube, we will see. Today, we're gonna make this 4-panel card. I'm going to use essentially the same materials that I used to make this card to make a second card. And I'll see how versatile it is. It is tied together by a nice little ribbon. I will never get the bow to look as good as it may have a second ago if I tried to tie it, but I'm gonna let that go. It opens up into a 4-panel card that has an insert where I can put my greeting. I could also do a lot more decorating if I wanted to put something on these panels on the left. And then I have an entire landscape to do more decorating on the back if I wanted to do that. But we're going to literally jump in and start in on this card. The easiest way to do it is just to do it. So I sent out these directions. They're in a Word document. And I also will try to put these out on whatever medium the video ends up going to. So the Word document hopefully will be there as well. And I'm literally going to kind of go step by step, and we'll do this one together. To make this card, you need 1 piece of 8.5 by 11 standard cardstock. And then you need designer series paper. I found that it is easier to cut the panels to the size that you need if you start with a 12 by 12. And I will show you a couple of little tricks and tips when we get to that point. But the first step is you're going to take your piece of cardstock and you're going to cut that to 5.5 by 11, which means you're going to stick the cardstock into your paper trimmer and cut off 3 inches, because if you're starting at 8.5, you want to get down to 5.5, you are going to cut off 3 inches and you'll end up with 2 pieces of paper. You do not want to get rid of the smaller piece because that is going to end up being used for your 4th panel. But what we're going to do is we're going to use this piece, the 11 by 5.5, and it's going to be the base for 3 of the panels. So if I line up this card, you can see that the largest panel and then the 2 in the middle are the length of that card. And the largest panel is the height of that piece. So we're going to use this piece to create 3 of the panels for the card. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to grab a scoring board. And for me, the easiest way that I found to do this was to get a large scoring board. This is a Martha Stewart one. And you can do it on a smaller scoring board as well. You don't have to use a big one. We're going to make 3 score lines. And those score lines are going to be at 1/4 inch, at 3.5, and at 6 3/4. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. When I do a score that is kind of small in width on the left side of a piece of paper, I tend to hold the piece a little bit over to the right and push it just a tad so that it stays on the left side of the scoreboard. So that's at 1/4 inch. And then I want 3.5. And then the last one that I want is 6 3/4. And now I have the marks that I'm going to use for the panel. So let's just pull this out and you can see that panels line up with those score lines. So this is how we're creating the panels. Okay, I'm going to grab that piece, get rid of my scoreboard for right now. And now I'm going to grab my cutting board. And And what I need to do here is, again, if I bring out the card, you're going to see that the largest panel is the width of the piece that we just cut. So it's 5.5. But the next two, these two pieces, these two panels are shorter. That means we need to cut off some of the paper right in this area. The way that I have oriented this paper in my paper cutter is I have put it so that I've got the 1/4 inch score line down at the bottom. And I have the 3.5 as the next score line. Because what I'm going to do is I need to cut from the edge of the paper and the edge where that 1/4 inch is, all the way up to the score line that I put at 6 3/4. Because again, what I'm doing is I'm cutting off a piece of that paper. And I'm going to do it at 3/4 of an inch. So if I push this piece over to 3/4 of an inch, and then I want to cut from the bottom up to that score line because I want to have a piece that I'm literally just kind of cutting out.
Bring your board down. I just want to see it on that board.
It's easier if I show you right here. Because Marita, what I'm doing is I'm bringing it in 3/4 of an inch. So here's my 1 inch line. My 1 inch line is right here. And I'm bringing it to 1/4 of an inch before that 1 inch line. So I've got 1 to 3/4 that I'm cutting it into. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut, but I'm going to stop at the score line that I made for 6 3/4. And the way that I like to do this is I'm literally going to stand up just a little bit and I'm going to push the blade, and this horizontal bump that I have on my blade is telling me where that blade is on the paper underneath. And I'm stopping right as I get to that score line. And then if I lift up, this is what I have. I have a piece of paper that is now cut from the side that had the 1/4 inch score line all the way up to where it was 6 3/4. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pair of scissors and I'm just going to cut out on the score line, because what I want to end up with is this. I want to end up with that notched out of the original piece of paper. And to do that, I find it easier just to take scissors rather than take the cutting board. You definitely can take the cutting board, but for me, a pair of scissors and just going right up to that 3/4 inch. And you're going to feel when it sort of lets loose there. And this is what I want to end up with. So I have a piece of paper that is still 11 inches long, and I have my 3 basic panels. And this is mirroring what I have on this card. The 4th panel we're going to do separately, but you can see how that's stepped down. And now this piece is also stepped down. So I've created pretty much the base for the 3 panels. Now I need to add the 4th panel. And the 4th panel is going to be made by using that extra piece that I have when I initially cut the 8.5 by 11. So this is a piece that measures 3 inches wide and 11 inches long. That is my extra piece. I want to have this piece be 4 inches long and 2.5 inches wide. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to flip this and I'm going to cut it 4 inches long and 2.5 inches wide. And that is going to be the 4th panel on the card. It's going to be the front panel. Again, let's just take a minute and look at the finished card. Because here's my finished card. I have the 4th panel, and you can see that it's the same size as this one. But notice that right here at the top of that panel, we need to make sure that that panel fits nicely against the rest of the card. Well, I've got a 1/4 inch score line, and that 1/4 inch score line is going a little bit higher than this panel. I don't want that. What I want to end up with when I get done with this is I don't want a scored piece 1/4 inch up here. I want that to be done. What you can't see well is I've used that 1/4 inch and I've actually used it to glue on the 4th panel. So what that means is I need to make another little notch out of the larger piece. So when I attach the 4th panel, I don't have this extra 1/4 inch scored piece up at the top. This is 3/4 of an inch from the top that I need to cut. This is 4 inches. This is actually 4 3/4 inches high. I need to cut off 3/4 of an inch on this piece, but I only need to cut it out so that that little notch comes out. So I am, again, take my wonderful little paper trimmer, and I'm using the same measurement. And I have it oriented, so I've got that 1/4 inch score line down here. I'm going to pull that over to the 3/4 inch mark, which again is 1, 2, 3/4 inches. And I want to put a really small cut into this paper just up to that 1/4 inch line. And sometimes it's easier just to do a little bit of a cut, and then if you don't get quite to the 1/4 inch, you can do it with your scissors. So I have a very small notch that I've made in that piece, and I just want to cut out that little corner. And then it will line up with the 4th panel. So you can see I've just cut out a little piece of that corner. And now when I take my 4th panel and I put it on, it lines up really well. So I have the front panel, the 2 middle panels, and the back panel. And that is the basis. If I push this out of the way, that is the basis. That's the card base for this card. So you can see we took one piece and we created these 3 panels. We cut out 3/4 down and all the way up to the score line at 6 3/4, pulled that out. Then we notched out 3/4 from the top to the score line at a 1/4 inch. And that allowed us to tuck in the 4th panel so it looks like it is at a different height, and that 1/4 inch scored area will be where we actually glue it together. So when we have these pieces, we are going to do some folding. And the way that we're going to fold this is we know that this is the back of the card. If that's the back of the card, then this is going to fold to the right. And I'm going to just burnish it a little bit as we do this to get some good creases. By default, this is going to fold the other way. And then we have this 1/4 inch score that we need to fold forward. It is going to be where we are going to attach that 4th panel so that it looks like a continuous card. So where we're going to put some glue and we're actually going to glue on that 4th piece right to the front of the card. I'm going to pause here because I want to make sure that to this point, everyone is doing okay. And just to check in to see if there are any questions. So I'm just going to pause for a second and I'm going to pull in some green paper so this is a little bit easier to see as far as what I am doing here. So at this point, you should have 2 pieces of paper, one with 3 panels and one with the 4. And you're going to fold them so that the 2 panels in the middle are coming up toward you. So now let's attach the 4th panel. And the way that I like to do this, and you choose. I like to put the 1/4 inch scored piece on the inside of the front, meaning when I close up this card, you are not going to see that little scored area. That will be on the inside. The reason I like it like that is it honestly doesn't matter, but when you put the designer series paper on, you're not going to see that scored area on the inside of that front panel. It's going to blend into the background and no one will really know that it's there. So this is what I like to do. I'm going to grab my Tombow glue and I'm going to put the glue on the 1/4 inch, or the 1/4 inch scored area. I'm not going to put it on the other piece because I don't really know where on the other piece I should put it. I might put too much. I might put it over too far. And then when I put it together, I might be adding more glue than I need. And then I'm going to kind of push that piece down. And I'm going to, as best as I can, not saying bad things about myself, I'm going to attach that 4th panel to the front and just give it a nice little burnish. And now I have a 4-panel folding card. Obviously, the piece that was added to the original 11-inch piece is the 1st panel. There are many different ways that you can make this kind of card, and you can decide as you make these how you want to align your panels. You can have each of the panels be a different height. What you would need to do is decide how much of the top of the panels you cut off. I could go halfway in between the 1st and the 2nd and cut that off over to the next score line, and I would have a different panel. So it's really up to you as you work through these to figure out what you want to do with them. But essentially, we now have the card base. And the fun part happens because we are going to decorate. And the decorations that I chose for the example card are primarily designer series paper. Let's talk about that first. We have 4 pieces of designer series paper on the, I guess you'd call this the inside card. And then we have one piece on the front. Well, we can see that for the two center pieces, the two center panels, the designer series paper are the same size. The back one obviously is bigger. And then for the front and the back of that first panel, the designer series paper pieces are the same. In the directions, I put in the sizes that I recommend, assuming that you're using these measurements, that you use for the designer series paper. And what I'm going to do is I want to show you just a little sort of tip on how to cut your 12 by 12 piece of designer series paper so that you can make sure your design is at least going in the same direction when you put your paper on. So if you look at this final card, you can see that the stems of these pieces are all going vertical. And I had to think about how I was going to cut that paper to make sure that the pattern all looked like it was going vertical. I also chose paper that didn't have a real pattern like a line or a plaid or a repeating pattern that visually looked like it should go in a straight horizontal line, because that would have been a mess to try and get everything lined up. This is much more of a random piece. It is from a retired set of designer series paper, but we all have enough that we can appreciate designs where we can use up some of what we have. So let me show you a little trick, or maybe a tip. It may not be a trick, but let's just talk about how to think about cutting your designer series paper for this particular card. So I'm going to bring this back. I've got one piece here that is 4 inches wide, and it's going to be 5 1/4 inches long. Essentially, this piece is the size, this panel is the size of a regular A2 card. It is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So if I cut 4 by 5 1/4, I'm leaving a nice border around the outside. But again, it's 4 inches wide and 5 1/4 long. These two are 3 inches wide and 5 1/2 long. And then the last one is 2 1/4 inches wide and 3 3/4 inches long. Let's not get hung up on the measurements right now. Let's just think about this. I know that I need one panel that is going to be 4 inches wide. I know I need 2 that are going to be 4 inches wide. And I know I need 2 that are going to be 2 1/4 inches wide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my paper oriented in my paper trimmer the way I want it to show on the panel. And I'm going to just cut the widths. I got 3 different widths. So the first width I'm going to cut is the 4-inch one. So I'm going to
first one's going to be what?
It's 4 inches wide by 5 1/4 long. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut my 12 by 12 paper at the 4-inch line. And eventually I will cut it to the 5 1/4 as well. But I'm going to put this one to the side because I've got my 4-inch wide piece. I know I need 2 panels that are going to have 3 by 4 1/2. And I am going to make sure that that vertical view of the designer series paper is the same as the piece that I just cut. So I cut off a 4-inch one. Now I'm going to cut off a 3-inch piece. Eventually this piece will turn into 2 panels. And then the last one that I have that's going to go on the front panel, I know that is 2 1/4 inches wide. And again, I'm cutting it because I want to make sure that I know how to align it vertically and make sure that the design is all going in the same direction. So let's go back to the first piece that I cut. The first piece I cut was 4 inches wide. I need one panel that is going to be 4 inches wide by 5 1/4. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that to 5 1/4. And that is going to be for the back panel. I'm going to go to the second strip that I cut. And that one I cut to 3 inches wide. And I need 2 panels for this. And both of them are going to be 4 1/2 inches long. So I'm going to cut one at 4 1/2. And I'm going to scooch that paper up, and I'm going to cut a second one at 4 1/2. They are going to be for the middle panels. And because I intentionally cut that 12 by 12 in the same direction, you can see that my pattern is going in the same way. So it's all with the stems going up. That's what I want. And then the last piece that I cut from the 12 by 12 was 2 1/4 inches wide. That's going to go on the front of the front and the back of the front panel. And they both need to be 3 3/4 inches long. So I'm going to go ahead and do 3 3/4 inches and 3 3/4 inches. And those two will go on the front and the back of the front panel. And again, I'm being repetitive, but because I made sure that I cut 4 inch wide, 3 inch wide, and 2 1/4 inch wide, I knew that my pattern was all going to go in the same direction. And for this kind of card, it is important because when you close everything up, you want it to look like it's all going in the same direction. Then you can go ahead and adhere the panel pieces directly to your card. And this is like watching paint dry. It's actually like watching glue dry, but that's what I'm going to do here. And you can also, on the designer series paper that you have, you know, if you like the background or the design on the back of the paper, it can be fun to alternate the pattern between the different panels, or you can grab designer series paper that works really well together, maybe 2 completely different patterns, and put one on one panel and one on another and alternate it. It's also a really cool idea if you put pictures, die cuts, or other embellishments on the panels themselves. And you can make it, you know, very, very eclectic. They're just each panel can be a piece of art in and of itself. You don't have to use the same kind of designer series paper. I just wanted to do this because it's pretty quick and also to kind of show you the trick. One thing that I also do is I am lining up the second panel as straight as I can against the first one that I put down. I'm not really concerned that I'm getting this piece exactly centered. I'm trying to line up the bottom of each piece so it looks like it is purposely going in as straight a line as I can get. And I'm not going to say bad things about myself if it doesn't end up exactly where I want it to go. And I'm also going to double check before I put that piece down on the card that I have the pattern oriented correctly. Because Lord knows, we've all done that before. We've unintentionally got to the end of a project and kind of messed it up a little bit. So again, I'm lining the bottom up as best I can with the other piece, and I am trying to get it as straight as I can as well. And now you can see that on that front panel, I have that piece that has the 1/4 inch score. And the beauty of this is when I put my designer series paper on, I'm going to be covering up the majority of the visible place where I've glued the 2 pieces of paper together. It's going to be something that you are going to know is there, but no one else is either going to notice or care because it's very, very invisible. It truly is. And again, I'm going to go ahead and put that last piece on and try to line it up with the bottom. So now I have all the panels on the inside of my card. And the last one that I need to do is I need to put the panel on the outside of the card. And what can be really fun and sort of just happenstance is, for example, right here, the front of this panel with the design looks pretty much like it's going straight up, where you've got this vertical stem that almost looks like it's continuous. And then here, another happy circumstance, it almost looks like these are purposely growing vertically. And it just happened to be like that, but I'll take it. If it worked, it worked. And that's why a kind of random pattern on a card like this is preferable rather than attempting to make something intentionally work panel to panel. And this one, I'm still going to do my best. I've still got a horizontal line down at the bottom where I'm trying to get that paper to line up visually so it looks pretty purposeful. And there we go. I've got my 4 panels on the inside and I've got my 1 panel on the front. Now, obviously, you've got 3 more panels that you can choose to decorate. You can choose to leave alone. You can do whatever you would like. And an obvious statement, but I will make it, is I still have paper left over from the 12 by 12. If I wanted to cut another piece and put that on the back, I can definitely do that. And it's up to you. I am going to choose to leave it as it is for right now. I can come back later if I want to. I'll show you when I get done with the card, but you still have an opportunity if you want to make some changes, you can definitely do that. And now it is pretty much up to you what you would like to do. I'm going to show you what I did on the example card, and I'm pretty much going to mimic it on this card. I wanted to put an area where I could put a sentiment on the back panel. And if that is something that you want to do, I just recommend that you think about the size of this piece, because what I wanted to be able to do is when I closed the 2 panels on the inside, that you wouldn't be able to see the panel with a sentiment. So this white piece is cut to 2 7/8 wide by 4 3/8 long. And what I did is I've already put another together. This is, like I just said, it's 2 7/8 wide and 4 3/8 long. And you have, again, got a bunch of choices. I put this, when I was putting the example card together, I put it in here like this. And what I didn't particularly care for is I couldn't see a real visual difference. There wasn't a real border between the designer series paper and where I had stamped. And this stamp, by the way, is from the stamp set. This is one that we've had for a while. It's still in the annual catalog. And it has some really nice fall designs. And I stamped this stamp, as you can see, a little bit off the paper on the bottom. I use the color of green and the designer series paper, which is mint macaron, and I stamped that in the bottom right. But what you're going to notice is on the card that I finished, I actually put a border around that sentiment. I thought it made it stand out a little bit more. And if you do that, again, the white piece is 2 7/8. So I bumped up the espresso, the early espresso piece, to 3 inches wide. The white piece is 4 3/8. So I bumped up the early espresso to 4 1/2. And all that did is added 1/8 of an inch of width and 1/8 of an inch of length. It gave it a nice border, I thought, around the outside. And then I just made sure that when I heat that down, that when I close these panels in the middle, I can't see that. It's almost like a card within a card. And on the front, again, you can do whatever makes you happy. And what I chose to do was kind of a double step die. I used dies from the Tasteful Labels die collection. This is a great set that is incredibly versatile. And I use the You Are the Happy to My Day, which is just, I think, a fun sentiment. I stamped that onto white cardstock, and I used early espresso ink, which is the same color as the cardstock that I used to start the card. And then the die that I cut that out with is this shape, which worked really well around the sentiment. And then I wanted another die behind, so I used this die and cut out a piece of the early espresso. And I have that as a 2-layer piece. So these are the pieces that I actually have. And I'm going to go ahead and I will put these, the ones that I just showed you, I'll put that on the card that I'm making right now. And then I took a piece of 20-inch long ribbon. And I'm going to show you how I might suggest that you adhere the ribbon and you measure where you should be putting the ribbon. So let me go ahead and grab some of the ribbon that I use. This is from the Basket Weave and Metallic Ribbon Combo Pack. And it's really pretty. It's very thick. It is a mint macaron color, so it goes really perfectly with the designer series paper. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut a piece to right about 20 inches, and that will give enough for me to make sure that I can take it all the way around the card and put a bow in it to start with. Because what I want to have is a bow tied, and then I will figure out how I'm going to put that piece down. So I have my 20-inch piece of ribbon, and any ribbon you have will work beautifully with this. And I'm going to bring back in the card that I've been making over the last few minutes. I don't need to put my sentiment on yet. I'm going to put the ribbon on first. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the card closed. I am going to not really get all crazy about where I am putting the ribbon. What I really want to do is I want to get a bow tied. And you ladies know me well enough that I'm super spoiled and I love using the bow maker. So my bow tying abilities without a bow maker are kind of pitiful. And feel free to laugh, chuckle, whatever you want. I will not be offended. And what I'm doing here is I'm simply trying to figure out, I'll make this prettier later. This isn't the point of me tying it right now, but about where I would want the ribbon to be if I had it tied in a bow. And I actually want it over just a little bit more. So I'm going to squish or scooch that ribbon over. And I also put a little bit higher. I want it sort of in the middle of this front panel as best as I can get. And then when I have it where I want it, I'm going to retie the bow. I don't like that bow, but that's not the point right now. The point right now is I want to get that ribbon where it is going to end up. And then I'm going to glue it down. To glue it down, I'm going to take a really, really, really quick shortcut because I am actually going to take some dimensionals that are going to do double duty because they're going to hold up the sentiment and they're also going to hold my ribbon on. And I'm putting them so that part of the dimensional is on the designer series paper, part of it is on the ribbon, and that way it is going to hold down to the ribbon. This eventually will also help me hold on my die cut piece. I'm just going to put all of these down. And now that ribbon is not going to move. If I were to untie this and open up the card, that ribbon is going to stay put. And that's really what I want. Now, if you want, and you can untie this right now because it's not going anywhere. If you wanted to be extra careful, you can also put some glue, and I might do that just because, why not? So I can put a little bit of glue right underneath that ribbon just to help it stay put because we don't want this moving after I have the card together. So I'm just going to pull that back and it will dry on its own. So I've got some glue in there as well. And then I can put my sentiment on the front. I really do like the sentiment. I just think it's very fun. I counted this card as one that I made as part of World Card Day. I don't know if I was a little too liberal in my definition because I started part of it the day before, but I'm going to make it count. So that's okay. And I'm just putting my sentiment on top of the second die cut and getting it kind of straight. And that eventually is going to go on the top. Be mindful that if you did this, you have dimensionals in the middle, which means you don't need to put dimensionals in the middle here. What you need are a couple on the sides because that's where I want to make sure that everything is going to stay put. And we also all know that you can never, ever, ever go wrong with cutting and using every little bit of dimensionals that you get on a sheet. So I'm just taking these 4 and I'm putting them right at the corners because again, when I put this on the card, I've already got the middle, which I'll take those little pieces off in a second. I've got the middle already taken care of and I'm just putting dimensionals around the outside. I'll go ahead and take these off as well. Whoever invented these is absolutely brilliant.
And rich.
And rich. And brilliant. All right, and I'm just going to stand up a tad because I want to see if I can get this as straight as possible. I'm going to get my scissors here so it will stay down a little bit. And I'm just going to add that sentiment. Again, I'm not saying bad things about myself. And there we go. So my ribbon is all set. It's not going anywhere. And I will have an opportunity when I'm done with the card to retie this in a prettier bow. You can also do some things on the back if you want. And you still, like I said, you still have the ability. If I changed my mind and I want to put some designer series paper on the back, I can still do that. I'm going to tell you something that is obvious. You can all make faces at me and I will not mind at all. You do not want to glue this ribbon down on the back.
Yeah.
Because you want to be able to open your card. You will not be able to do that if you glue the ribbon down. So this ribbon is going to be free flowing unless you choose to hold it or close this card in a different way. But that ribbon is going to just be free flowing, which really means that the recipient is probably going to tie this into a bow, and it's not going to be the prettiest bow, and that's fine. Or the person who receives it may display it like this, where they will actually see your sentiment. And that, again, is fine. The last thing that I need to do for this card to finish it is to put in this sentiment piece. And I am just going to, yeah, this will work. I am using part of what I had to start with. This is part of the extra piece that we had when we cut the original 8.5 by 11. And if you remember, the size that I want for my border is going to be 3 by 4.5. Well, kind of cool because the piece that we originally cut is 3 inches wide because we cut our piece down from 8.5 to 5. I'm sorry, 8.5 to 5.5. So we cut off 3. So I've already got my 3. So if I turn that and I go to 4.5, then I'm going to have my border for my insert. And I'm still using the same piece of paper that I started with. And I'm just going to put these two together. And you may find that you don't need to do this. You know, you may think and find that the piece you choose to put in the sentiment on the inside, it may look fine.
Okay, so
you
you
need to add a border. It really depends on the colors that you choose. But if you choose to do this, you can again use the extra piece that you started with. And
no, I have
so
dies that I cut out on my machine.
I am going to take that piece and I am going to put it in the bottom left of that back panel. Before I put it down though, I am going to make sure that when I fold the metal piece over, that I can't see it. Just to make sure that I'm putting it in the right place. And I'm going to add some adhesive to the back. And put that down. And put it down, and then I'm going to quickly make sure that I'm good before we don't have a chance to move it. And now I have my sentiment piece in the back. And I have my card built. The ribbon should be good if I want to try to tie another bow. So I will try to do that. We'll see how this one comes. I think I need to practice a little bit because I got so spoiled with the bow maker. Actually, I can't even say that I used to be able to tie a bow. I won't lie. We'll see what this one's gonna look like. Yeah. This is where I sing songs. I hum. All right, this time I know it's gonna work. There we go. Maybe. And I'll pretty it up. I'll do my best to pretty it up. And then this is it. Now, you can go further if you want to bling it up, if you want rhinestones, or I know a lot of us like the Priscilla, that can look really pretty as well.
Snowflakes.
Snowflakes. And that's not the prettiest of bows, but it gives you an idea.
Nice.
Beautiful.
This was the original on the left. The one on the right, shockingly, looks very much the same. And
reproducibility.
you know, I could put a couple of little gems or something on it if I wanted, maybe some of these clear ones.
Mm-hmm.
That is it. So that is a 4-panel card. And just like most cards, the possibilities are pretty much endless. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the video.